Ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of a pro wrestling interview and how they happen, how they go down? Well, I'm going to go ahead and break that down for you guys here today. I am going to share my top 10 most watched interviews of this year. Now, for the 2024 calendar, I did a total of 103 interviews as of this video right now. Maybe there'll be some more sprinkled out for the rest of the month. Who knows? But at least as of this video, I did 103 interviews in 2024. I will say, I think this was my biggest interview year ever. And I've been doing interviews now with wrestlers, God, for several years. You can go way back on here and find those here on the channel. But today we're focusing on 2024. And I'm going to be sharing with you like behind the scenes tidbits, fun facts, stuff like that. And also how many views these videos actually got. I said this was my best interview year ever. And it truly was, guys. In January, I did a total of 36 interviews. Of course, Royal Rumble week, that's really what got me get so much. I also got to go to Radio Row as part of the Super Bowl weekend in Las Vegas, which was an also huge opportunity for me to get some content. In February, actually, that's when I did the Super Bowl thing. Never mind, that was in February. But then they also had the WrestleMania kickoff party, which also helped me get some interviews as well. By end of March, I was already at 50 interviews. So as you can tell, I got the first good amount of content in the first 3 months of the year. By April, May, and June, I was already at 68, which is kind of crazy to think because you would think it'd be a little bit heavier for WrestleMania, but it was actually heavier for the Royal Rumble. And by the end of the summer, so by end of August, I was already at 89. What really helped me during that time was going to Bash in Berlin. And then by the time we got to December was when when did I hit 100? I hit 100 in October and then 103 by December. So as you can tell, there were some slower months and some really good months, but which ones were the most watched and what are some fun facts behind them? So let's get to it. Starting at number 10 with over 94,000 views was my first ever one-on-one interview with CM Punk. So even though this one landed in the number 10 spot, I gotta tell you guys, it was my favorite interview of the entire year. And the reason I say that is because I grew up a big CM Punk fan. I've been a CM Punk fan for years, and I never thought that I would actually get the chance to interview him. I really thought that it was sort of out of the realm of possibility. And even when he was in AEW, I did get to ask him some questions during the press conferences, but I don't really count that because it's not a one-on-one interview. I feel like until you have that connection with that person in that moment where you're talking just the both of you, to me, that's what really counts. And so to be able to interview CM Punk one-on-one, even though it was just for a couple of minutes, I was so freaking excited. And I was kind of nervous too, because, you know, you don't really want to fuck up. CM Punk is a very high profile name, and you don't want to fuck up when you got an interview with somebody that is like that big of a star. And so this interview happened at Comic-Con, and I had actually missed the credential application for Comic-Con. I thought I had applied for Comic-Con as press, but it turns out I had applied to have the ability to apply. So I better not make that same mistake this year. And it was because it was my first time applying for Comic-Con. I had never applied before. And so I was so depressed that I wasn't going to get to go to Comic-Con, right? And then something like this, it was just meant to be, guys. This interview was just meant to be because all of a sudden I got an offer to host a San Diego Comic-Con panel. And I thought, well, how am I going to get in if I don't have any sort of credential or anything like that? And the people that were that had hired me to do the Comic-Con panel were like, oh, don't worry, we're going to get you a pass and you'll be able to come in. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great. So I hit up WWE and I was like, hey, I'm going to be at Comic-Con. If there are any opportunities available for interviews, I would really much love to be considered, right? And lo and behold, they were like, yeah, these are the people that we have for interviews that day. And one of the names was CM Punk. And I'm like, no way. And it's so funny because part of me was afraid to like get excited about it. Like I didn't tell anybody. I knew at least a week in advance or maybe a couple days in advance before Comic-Con, but I didn't tell anybody that this interview was happening because I was so afraid that I was going to jinx it. So I didn't tell nobody, but I prepared for the interview and then I thought, you know what? It may not happen. So don't get your hopes up, Denise. I basically lowered my expectations a whole lot just so I wouldn't be disappointed in case it didn't happen. But lo and behold, it did happen. And CM Punk was very, very nice. He was so kind to me. That was the number one question everybody was asking me was CM Punk nice? He's very, very nice. He knew me by name, approached me, shook my hand. And even afterwards, as I was packing up my gear, he saw like a bag on the floor and asked me if it was mine. It was actually mine, but it was just so awesome because I was like looking at my gear and I was on the floor packing my stuff, right? And I just hear a voice above my head say, "Hey, Denise, is this your bag?" And I look up and I'm like, "Oh shit, it's CM Punk." And he just referred to me like, but that was internally, of course. You can't like fangirl in front of talent, of course. But I was like, yeah, thank you so much. It's my bag. Thank you. And he was just really, really nice. And he really did me a solid too by also, appearing in that Danhausen interview. So I was so proud of that one. That was the one interview this year that I got the most texts from immediately after I shared it. Everybody was just like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you got CM Punk. I'm so jealous." Or what was he like? And that one, people were really, really proud of me for that interview because that one was a hard get that just kind of happened to happen. And it was like sort of meant to be for me to get that interview at Comic Con. So very, very proud of that interview. Lots of great feedback on that interview. And again, it was brief, but I thought it was really great. So that was my 10th most watched interview and also my favorite of the year. Number 9 is the name you're going to see quite a bit on this list. And it is Rhea Ripley following the Royal Rumble. So this one got over 98,000 views. Now, this was a really, really cool day. I got incredibly lucky because WWE held an event called for Bianca's reality TV show Love and WWE, something like that, or WWE and Love. No, I think it's Love and WWE. Anyway, so they did this event, right? But it was so funny. It's so crazy how things just happen because I had applied for Royal Rumble credentials, right? And after you apply for Royal Rumble credentials, they then give you a list of events that are going down. And you get to look at that list and kind of pick out what you want to do. So I picked out a few and I thought, I'll come home immediately after the Rumble and, I'll just come home, right? So I didn't select the premiere because for whatever reason, I didn't know it was going to be like a red carpet. I thought it was just going to be like you go and you watch the show. Like that's what I thought. So I thought, okay, I'm just not going to go to that and I'll come home and I'll do a post show, right? And so I didn't check off the box and I submitted my credential. I then got a call from WWE or a text or something. And they were like, "Hey, are you not going to go to the 11 WWE event?" And I thought, like, I have my flight. I wasn't considering, but if you think I should go, I can reschedule all that. And they were like, "Yeah, we think you should come." They told me, they're like, we think you're going to, we think you're going to get a lot of good material here. You should come. And so I thought, okay, I trust you guys. I'm going to go to the event and get some, see what content I get. So that was where I ended up getting the most interviews. It was like 20 plus interviews. I probably could have even gotten more. But when it comes to like red carpet, which I love red carpets, those ones are a little bit harder because as you're talking to people, you can see some people that you want to interview passing you by. And once you pass them by, it's kind of hard to get them back in your direction. It's a whole thing, right? But anyways, I was very proud of all the interviews I got to get that day. And Rhea Ripley was one of them. And this one was cool because I kind of talked to her a lot during this week. I had another interview with her prior to this, but she is just the sweetest person. It's so funny because I think a lot of people like see Rhea and you don't know what she would be like in real life, right? Like you might not know what her real life personality is. Well, I can confirm to you, if you are a Rhea Ripley fan, you are standing the right person because she is incredibly, incredibly kind. She can be someone you might be intimidated to approach, right? But she doesn't give that vibe off at all. In fact, she actually has a very welcoming presence where if you're like next to her, like it's okay to like approach her like in that kind of situation, of course. And she was just so nice and she's so down and she always gives such great answers. She always really listens to the question. And she, even though sometimes she gets asked the same questions or silly questions or whatever questions she may get, she never shows that. Like she's always so kind and humble with what she's being asked. And she's always down to give a really well thought out answer, even if she's answered the question 100 times, right? And so that's been sort of my favorite thing about Rhea is that she makes you comfortable when you're interviewing her instead of coming off like a diva, right? Like that's not Rhea Ripley at all. And so, yeah, that was my ninth most watched interview this year. But now let's go ahead and get into number 8, which was Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest with over 107,000 views. All right, guys. So this is one. Wow. So I went to Bash in Berlin and I thought, you know what? It was so funny because I was having a horrible trip. Many of you guys saw that I'd lost my luggage. I was so down in the dumps. I'm like, why did I fly all the way over here? I started thinking, I started thinking the worst, right? I was kind of a negative Nancy. I was Debbie Downer, you name it. I just wasn't having a good travel experience, right? And wow, this ended up being the trip that I was the most thankful that I did this entire year. This one was the one that was the most worth it for me. Again, even though I got really brief interviews because, they only have so much time, guys. They don't always have a lot of time to go down and do these interviews. Like WWE keeps their top stars very, very busy. As you can imagine, Rhea and Damian Priest were definitely busy. And so we did this interview, and it was funny because I thought, like, man, I've interviewed Rhea a lot, so I got to start coming up with some different stuff. Also, when you are interviewing somebody that is when you're interviewing two people instead of one, that changes the entire dynamic of an interview, right? Because when you are talking to one person, the questions are all about them. When you have two people that you're interviewing, you have to make it about both of them because if not, one person feels left out in the interview and you don't want the other person to feel like a third wheel. So when I do duo interviews, it changes the entire thing. It changes the questions that I ask. It changes the type of interview that I do with them. And this interview ended up being so awesome. And I actually feel it ended up being better because Rhea and Damian were feeding off of each other, where I was just kind of like, the microphone stand and letting them show their personality and show their friendship to all of the people that watched the interview. And so we ended up playing the GOAT game and they had such a good time with it. And Damian Priest and Rhea were so funny that it really just made it for a really great interview. This was actually my second most favorite interview of the year because of how fun it was. And it kind of took you through a bunch of emotions. It was funny, it was heartfelt, all of it. So I was very, very proud of this one. My seventh most watched interview was Seth Rollins with 112,000 views. And this took place over at WrestleMania's kickoff party in Las Vegas. So the funny thing about this was I was not in Las Vegas for WWE. I was in Las Vegas for Radio Row Super Bowl. Like I had already had that planned. However, in January, when I did the Love and Bianca event, I overheard someone talking about them doing a WrestleMania kickoff, or not WrestleMania kickoff, but I overheard them saying something about an event happening in Las Vegas during Super Bowl weekend. And so, of course, piqued my interest. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be in Las Vegas during that time. Please consider me for that event. And so, cool. I got the information for that. I went and there was a bunch of media there. And this one was a little bit more complicated though, because they were very selective on like if you got approval to go to the event, it didn't necessarily mean that you were approved to cover the red carpet. So about like half the media that attended that event didn't actually get to do red carpet interviews. It was only select media after that. And so I was kind of standing there and I was like, damn, am I not going to get selected? And so I'm just standing there like, all right, I might not get selected here, like, oh shit, this might kind of be a little sucky, right? But then afterwards, lo and behold, I hear my name from PR and they're like, hey, Denise, come through. And I'm like, yeah, I got chosen. Woo! Oh, I made it, right? Like that was kind of sort of the feeling for that. But anyways, I got there and it was very, very few media. It was very, very quiet. They had two sections in the back where they had two little mini red carpets. And so I think in my side, there was like 6 media on my side and maybe 6 media on the other side. So, like maybe 12 media in total that were selected to actually do interviews. And so I was one of them. And this was the interview that I did with Seth Rollins. And it was very, very simple. We just kind of got into the newsy stuff of it. And that's what I like to do with my interviews. I like to keep it about news. Unless I've talked to the person a bunch of times, then I try to switch it up. Number 6, with over 146,000 views, was Jade Cargill. So Jade, this one was really great because I was one of the first people to talk to Jade after her WWE Royal Rumble debut, which was huge. And even then, I don't think very many people had Jade Cargill interviews. Like, I was one of the first ones that published up there with Jade Cargill having just came into WWE. So this was one where it was one of the first ones really that Jade actually did. And I got my video up, and so it did really well because a lot of people had not heard from Jade Cargill since going from AEW to WWE. So yeah, and she was also very nice. I had also, only asked her a question one time during a press conference in AEW. Again, not the same thing. In person, she was so kind, so beautiful. And again, it's funny because you would think maybe she would come across as a diva. She did not come across as a diva at all. Very nice person, very gorgeous person. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so the next interview that got very, very popular was my 5th most watched interview with 157,000 views was Big E. So this one was another one that happened at the Love and WWE event, and this one was another one that did very well, primarily because Big E really talked about his neck injury. He had talked about his neck injury before. However, most of those interviews were either print or podcast. And I've learned that in-person interviews just always do so much better. So this was one of the first in-person Big E interviews where he talked about his neck. And he's also a super cool person, is so nice. So he was just a really nice person. And I was so happy to get to interview him. And I've interviewed him before, but again, very, very quick type of stuff. Alrighty, next one, number 4 at over 177,000 views, which was Samantha Irvin and Ricochet. So Samantha Irvin and Ricochet, this one was one that I was very excited about because Samantha had done interviews, but she'd never done an interview with Ricochet, and Ricochet had never done an interview with Samantha. So it was kind of cute to see their on-camera dynamic. And one of the things that I've also learned that interviews that do well, 1, in person, that's huge, but 2 is couple interviews. In fact, my 2nd most watched video ever on this channel, besides the CM Punk Media Scrum, is an interview that I did with Bobby Lashley and Lana. That one was my first video to ever surpass 1 million views. And so couple interviews, I don't know what it is. People love to click on those. They really, really do. And so Samantha Irvin and Ricochet, they did this interview. It was great. They gave me some great fun facts about Samantha, ring announcing the entire Royal Rumble show. It was just a very fun little brief interview. Number 3 at over 275,000 views. So Tiffany Stratton and Ludwig Kaiser. I didn't know that Ludwig Kaiser and Tiffany Stratton were a couple at this point. You got to understand, in these red carpet events, there's like a shit ton of people, right? Everybody's, it's so crowded, right? And I saw Ludwig. I actually didn't see Tiffany. I think someone was standing in front of her that was blocking my view from her. And I'm a shorty, so I can't see shit. So I see Ludwig Kaiser. I'm like, hey, Ludwig, like, come on over, right? And then all of a sudden, I noticed that he's bringing this blonde woman. And for whatever reason, I didn't look at her face. Like, it was a blur. And then as she got closer to me, I saw her face. I'm like, oh shit, it's Tiffany Stratton. And then I'm looking and I'm like, Ludwig Kaiser and Tiffany Stratton, Ludwig Kaiser and Tiffany Stratton. All of a sudden, there's like 2 plus 2 is going on in my head. And, put 2 and 2 together. Hey, they're a couple. And I didn't even realize it till they got there. So I feel like had I known in advance, I think I would have probably switched up some of my questions. But for the most part, that was a very, very enjoyable interview. And it was just fun. Poor Tiffany, though, she didn't have much of a voice in this interview because she lost her voice at the show. So, but yeah, it was still very, very fun. And it was, I think, the first interview that went up with Tiffany and Ludwig. Like, I don't think they'd done an interview together before that. So it was kind of like a rare one to see. All right, and now at the number 2 spot, Liv Morgan and Dominik Mysterio. All right, so this is another one that I got at Bash in Berlin. Now, the fun fact about this is that this actually happened on a separate day than the first media day. So they had 2 media days at Bash in Berlin. They had the first one, which had Michin, Baron Corbin, Carmelo Hayes, those people. Then the second one was Rhea and Damian, Liv and Dominik. Now, I only knew about the first one. When I got the, the details to go to Bash in Berlin, and I had found out, hey, I'm going, blah, blah, blah. I had only known about the first one. And then the day before, I get a call from PR, and they're like, hey, we're going to do another press day. Rhea and Damian are going to be there. And I think they just said Rhea and Damian, actually. I don't even think they said Liv and Dominik. They didn't even say Liv and Dom. So I didn't even know Liv and Dom were going to be there. And so I show up, and this one was totally different from the first press day. The second press day had even less media. So I think I was the only video, maybe one other people were video, but I think I was the only video, and then the other ones were print. And when I say print, it's basically audio interviews, and then you get it out in a really nice article. That's print. So on the video side, I was the only one, really. And so they came in and they were like, all right, guys, we got exactly 15 minutes with Liv and Dom. And by that means that 15 minutes that they have the time allotted to do media is for everybody, which means that everyone there only gets like 2 minutes with Liv and Dom, right? Like, that's it. 2 minutes and that's it. And so, because you had to share those 15 minutes with everybody else. And so I go first. And I'm thinking, shit, I didn't even know Liv and Dom were going to be here. So I just go in and I'm like, all right, let's do this interview. It was very, very on the fly. I came up with all the questions on the fly because, again, I didn't know they were going to be there. And then all of a sudden, it's like, you got 2 minutes. And I'm like, shit, all right, just go. Which I don't mind because, look, realistically, if you watch the product every week, which I do, you know what to ask these people. You're keeping up with their storylines. You're keeping up with the news. So it's very easy sometimes to just, if you're in the know, then you can do that type of stuff and just go in and not have to like prepare the day before for an interview, right? So I did the interview with Liv and Dom, and it was so fun. And I decided just to just go and have fun with them. And because I knew I had a limited amount of time, I couldn't really go in even deeper in terms of other questions that I would have loved to ask. Because again, and when you have 2 people, it just changes the dynamic of the interview. And then also when you only got a few minutes. And it was funny too, because the publicist behind my camera was doing this. And this is the universal signal for you got to start wrapping up your question. And once you see them move a little faster, the speed is sometimes they'll do this, which just means start thinking about wrapping it up. Or they'll do this, meaning 1 more minute or 1 more question, like that. But once you start seeing this, you got to wrap that shit up, right? And so I was I saw her kind of do the slow motion. I'm like, I can stretch it 30 more seconds, squeeze in another question. And then finally I did it. I was I could see her in the back, speed it up, girl. So I was fuck it. I took all the time that I could. And so it was a very short interview, but I think that was also the first Liv and Dom interview that went up. And so because it was one of the first Liv and Dom interviews that went up, it also got a tremendous amount of views. So I was very, very proud of that. And it really, really just the whole thing, it made the trip worth it. All the interviews that I got in Bash of Berlin really, really made the trip worth it. And then, so yeah, I was very, very happy about that. And it did really good. So there you go. And number 1 on the list, the one that got my most views this year, an interview that went up this year, is Rhea Ripley at over 401,000 views. And this was Rhea Ripley plays a funny round of Never Have I Ever. So remember when I said that depending on how many times you talk to somebody, everything sort of depends what kind of questions you're going to ask the person, right? Now, this interview happened in early February. You got to understand, in January, I spoke with Rhea at the 2K event. I spoke with Rhea at the Love and WWE event. And I think that was it. Who knows? Maybe there was another one in there, but for sure I had spoken to her 2 times already in that month, really, like in 2 weeks, honestly, in a span of 2 weeks. And so it's funny because I see Rhea coming down, and I'm like, inside my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she's probably sick of seeing me by now. She's probably like, what the hell has this girl got left to ask me? She's already asked me everything. Like, what she probably like have left for me? And that's what I was thinking inside my head. I was like, man, Rhea's probably thinking, like, what else does this girl got left to ask me, right? But Rhea came down and I told Rhea, I said, Rhea, don't worry. I was like, I'm going to try something totally new with you. And she was like, okay, Amal, we're going to do something different here. And she was like, so excited. And then that's when I started with the Never Have I Ever game. And she was just so thrilled, I think, to do something different. Because for the most part, she'd been getting asked the same questions over and over again. So finally, when she came to me, she had said that she'd seen me play Never Have I Ever with other people. And she said, she was down to do it, and she did the interview, and it was so great because I feel like people kind of got a glimpse into Rhea Ripley, not the character Rhea Ripley, but the person Rhea Ripley, which she does in all her interviews. She's never in kayfabe in her interviews. She's always the real person. But this was so much fun. She did such a great job, and she really killed it, and people really liked the video. It was fun. And then from there on out, people kept asking me, like, do never have I ever with this person, do never have I ever with that person. And I saw the comments, so I kept doing it with other people because people kept asking me, like, do never have I ever. So I'm like, all right, I'll do what you guys want. But yeah, so that was my most watched video of the year. And actually, now I think it's number 6 in total of my top interviews. Actually, let me double check. Yes. So it is number 6 in total of my most viewed videos, period. And actually, as of right now, the video is actually at 408,000. It went up since 2 days ago that I actually wrote down my numbers. But yeah, so it's moving on up, and I think it could become probably. I'm hoping that it does break the 1 million. It'll probably be a while, but I do think it will break the 1 million views at some point, especially because it still gets traction to this day. And it's only 2 minutes and 55 seconds. People got 2 minutes and 55 seconds to spare. So yeah, so there you guys go. I wanted to do this video just to kind of give you guys more insight onto, which interviews were the most popular, just because I feel like that kind of shows who's a draw and who people want to like see and hear talk about them. Clearly on this list, Rhea Ripley is a draw. Every one of her videos that she does amazing views. So Rhea number 1 in terms of like drawing power here on my channel. I would say the people that have drawn me the most views on this channel is CM Punk and Rhea Ripley. Literally. Oh, and MJF does really great too. Braun Strowman also does really great numbers here. So yeah, it's just kind of random, but for sure Rhea Ripley was my top draw of this year here on the channel. So thank you, Rhea. But thank you guys so much for those of you who watched this video. I hope that maybe you kind of got some fun behind the scenes information. And then thank you for watching the interviews, guys. It really means a lot to me, honestly. It is hard to get the content, and it is hard to just stay positive, right? Because you got months that are ups and you got months that are down, and it could be really hard sometimes. But when people are constantly supporting your work, when people tweet me, I loved your interview with Liv. Oh, that was so amazing. Like all the comments that I got where people love my interviews, it's the most exciting thing that I can see. So thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. Check out these interviews and let me know which one was your favorite or which ones were your favorite this year. And if you guys watched any of the top 10, and if not, go watch the top 10. That was really what this video was about, encouraging you guys to go watch the top 10. Alrighty, guys, thank you so much, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye.